Well, welcome everybody to I Have a Question. We've been inviting you over the last couple of weeks to send in your questions about things that are going on in the church, to ask questions about the Bible, to ask questions about the sermon, and this is going to be our first time with I Have a Question. So there was a question that was sent in over email here over the last couple of weeks, and they were wondering about the Bible translation that we're using. So for the last month and for the next couple of weeks and maybe a little bit longer than that, we're doing this series called Praying the Psalms, and we are talking about how we can engage God in prayer using the poetry of the Psalms. And we've been using the Message Bible translation. So this is not what I typically preach out of. I usually use the New Revised Standard Version. So the reason I like to use the Message for messages like this, for sermons like this, is because the wording is so unfamiliar to us. In fact, often it just sounds weird. And we are used to the Bible sounding very formal. Used to the Bible being in kind of a formal register where everything sounds frozen, everything sounds the same from generation to generation. This wording is exactly the same. And when Eugene Peterson was translating the Message, he said he had two groups of people in mind. One, people who thought the Bible sounded formal and distant and couldn't understand it because of that, and wouldn't engage with it because of that. And then the other group of people was those who were so familiar with the Bible that it ceased to intrigue them. They were over familiar. They knew it so well that it just didn't have a whole lot of meaning for them. And so it was useful for both of those groups of people. So when we're talking about prayer, especially, when we are talking about how we talk to God and how we listen to God, I think it's very helpful to use sometimes words that are unfamiliar to us. A couple of my favorites are the Message Bible and also the Cotton Patch Gospel. They bring scripture to us in a way that sounds different from what we're used to, and so it kind of shocks us out of our overfamiliarity and maybe the contempt that goes with that familiarity. So just being able to hear it in a new and different way, I think is incredibly, incredibly helpful. So the same questioner in the email wrote in, wanted to know about why sometimes the Bible passage for that day was different in the bulletin and in my reading. And when I first heard that, I had a couple of ideas. First of all, I hadn't realized it was different that week. It was when we were reading Psalm 1 that it was so dramatically different. And I went and looked in a couple different places at what I'd read, and then I went and found the same passage online, and I found out that there had actually been a revision to the Message Bible in 2018. So this, I got this copy at a Walmart in Papillion when I was still in Bible college. And so it's been around now. I've had it for 16, 17 years, and they've done a revision since then. And that's normal. They do that from time to time. They'll make revisions of different translations of the Bible. I hadn't realized that there was a 2018 Message Bible revision, but every translation that we use is going to be a revision of something. Most Sundays, I told you, I preach from the New Revised Standard Version, and that is itself a revision of the Revised Standard Version, which came out, I think, in 1952. And that was a revision of the American Standard Version, which came out in 1901. And that was a revision of the King James Bible, which came out in 1611 and was written, as we all know, by Jesus himself. No, that was a revision. That was a revision of the Great Bible and the Bishop's Bible, both Bibles from the 16th century, and all those go back to Tyndale's English translation. Everything that we use, every Bible that we use is going to be a revision. So I, for one, need to pay a little closer attention to make sure I'm using the latest revision, because a lot of people get their Bible online. And if you use Bible Gateway, which is one that I use all the time, BibleGateway.com, you can find many, many different translations of Scripture, but they always use the most up-to-date translation. And the one I have on my shelf is almost always a revision or two behind. So for instance, if you're reading from the NIV, I know a lot of people love the NIV. Most of us have the 1984 version of the NIV. The one online is actually the 2011 NIV, and so there are going to be changes from place to place in that.
It's a little hard to update the paper copy of things as easy as the online.
It takes a little bit longer to update the paper copy. So you'd have to take your pen and your whiteout in individually through each one. And so, yeah, but I was happy to find out about that. I hadn't even realized that there had been a revision to the message. So I learned something new this week in answering the question. All right, well, just as a reminder to everybody, if you have any questions, please send them in to ihaveaquestion@omahabbc.com. Leave them on the Facebook page or write me a note, send me a carrier pigeon. Happy to get messages, however, and happy to continue responding to questions. Thanks again.